Welcome to NTD Good Morning. Here are today's top stories. As tax season begins, President Trump launches Trump Accounts, the new savings program aimed at helping families build long-term wealth for their children. FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is investigating Signal group chats used by protesters to coordinate activities in Minnesota. What he says they're looking for as tensions remain high. The government funding deadline is approaching as lawmakers remain divided over DHS spending. A look at negotiations and the latest on ICE operations in Minnesota. The White House has announced 15 new drugs for Medicare price negotiations. Which drugs could be available at lower prices? And new developments in the nationwide redistricting battle. Democrats' efforts to gain 4 more congressional seats in Virginia struck down by a state judge, and Republicans fighting to keep the status quo in New York. And NTD's International Photography Competition is in New York this week, exhibiting the work of its finalists, celebrating both the aesthetics of photography as well as traditional values.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Today is Wednesday, January 28th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. And in today's top news, President Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are hosting a summit in Washington today to officially launch the so-called Trump Accounts. The savings program is a central piece of the president's signature tax and spending legislation he's rolling out as Americans begin filing their 2025 tax returns. Under the new plan, the federal government will deposit $1,000 for every child born between 2025 and 2028, starting this July. Families can add to the accounts along with employer contributions, with funds invested in the broader stock market as well as locked until the age of 18 for the child. Several major companies, including Schwab and Robinhood, have already pledged to match the government's initial contribution. Treasury officials say more corporate commitments are expected as the administration promotes the program as a long-term investment in American families. And while in Iowa yesterday, President Trump pushed his economic message ahead of the 2026 midterms. This came as the president shakes up leadership on the ground in Minnesota. NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotsu has more.
President Trump is in Des Moines, Iowa, visiting local businesses there, talking to local lawmakers, and giving a speech touting his economic agenda. And his chief of staff, Susie Walz, says that he'll be hitting the road every week, one U.S. city per week, up until those midterm elections. President Trump urging voters to get out and vote for those midterms, saying the GOP needs to win. And this is coming as the White House is touting that President Trump is delivering the largest tax refund season in U.S. history.
But today, just after 1 year of President Trump, our economy is booming, incomes are rising, investment is soaring, inflation has been defeated, our border is closed, totally closed. And America is respected all over the world like they've never been respected. Now, I hope we win that Supreme Court case. You know, we have people that are China-oriented. They have people from literally that very China-oriented and foreign country-oriented trying to stop that, but we'll get it done one way or the other. We're going to do it. If we have to do it a different way, we'll do it.
Meanwhile, President Trump is calling for law and order amid mounting tensions with law enforcement in Minnesota, urging Democrat-led states to cooperate with the federal government. And this is as he deploys a border czar, Tom Homan, to Minnesota, where he says Homan will report directly to him. Take a look.
Tom, I've noticed, as tough as he is, he gets along very good with governors and mayors. We're going to de-escalate a little bit. I don't think it's a pullback. It's a little bit of a change.
Even Minnesota, their crime is down. And you know why it's down? Because of what we did. We took out thousands of criminals, career criminals, bad criminals.
The White House calling the Saturday shooting a tragedy while attributing it to a broader pattern of hostility toward law enforcement coming from local officials and the media.
This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota.
We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
This rhetoric against ICE, comparing them to Nazi Gestapo, Donald Trump's police force, is despicable, it is shameful, and it is precisely what has led to the escalation of tensions in Minneapolis and in other places across the country.
While President Trump says he's watching the ongoing investigations, FBI Director Kash Patel says they have found groups funding the Minnesota protests.
These are paid insurrectionists. These are paid agitators. These people aren't normal, like, that, they're incensed about anything. How do you get incensed when you go into a state and you're taking criminals out? You're taking monsters out.
And when asked about Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, President Trump says that she's not stepping down, that she's, quote, doing a very good job, and that the border is totally secure.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And a man has been arrested after spraying an unknown liquid at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar during a town hall meeting in Minneapolis. Audience members restrained the man before he was arrested. Omar's office said the Minnesota Congresswoman was not injured, and she continued her town hall after the incident. Police say the man has been charged with third-degree assault. It happened after Omar called for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to resign and for ICE to be dismantled. Yesterday's incident came on the same day the U.S. Capitol Police raised its threat assessment for members of Congress for the third year in a row. And Border Czar Tom Homan met with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz amid the tensions involving immigration enforcement operations in the state. Both Walz's office and President Trump have expressed some optimism, and they expect to have ongoing dialogue. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us more.
Border Czar Tom Homan met with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz Tuesday morning after being sent by President Trump to oversee ICE operations in the state. Walz's office says after the meeting, the governor and Homan agreed on the need for an ongoing dialogue and will continue working toward those goals, which the president also agreed to yesterday. Homan also met with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. Frey posted on X, "Today, Chief O'Hara and I met with Border Czar Tom Homan and had a productive conversation. I reiterated that my main task is for Operation Metro Surge to end as quickly as possible. City leaders will continue to stay in conversation with Mr. Homan and his team." And the Department of Homeland Security says it's investigating a woman after she attempted to buy a gun for the purpose of killing ICE agents. The DHS says that the woman, who is a U.S. citizen, quote, attempted to purchase a firearm on 2 separate occasions and stated she wanted to buy a gun to protect herself from ICE agents and also to kill ICE agents. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says every day there are more assaults, more vehicle ramming attacks, more attempts to kill our officers. Now we have an American citizen purchasing a gun with the intent to kill our officers.
We've seen an 8,000% increase in death threats. We're also seeing that their family members, where their children go to school, where their spouses work, that's being doxxed online, and they're being targeted too.
The DHS also shared an audio recording of a threatening phone message sent to a Minnesota-based ICE agent. Most of the content won't be played due to having disturbing language, but a warning: the following still contains material some viewers might find unsettling.
I hope your wife dies. I hope your mom and dad die. I hope everything wrong that could go in your life happens. I hope you have the most miserable life. I hope you get hit by a bus.
In response, the DHS says, quote, the men and women of ICE are fathers and mothers, sons and daughters. They get up every morning to try to make our communities safer. The violence and dehumanization must end. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thanks to Jason for that report. And Border Czar Tom Homan issued a statement saying that the meeting yesterday with Walz and Frey were productive and a good starting point. Homan said, quote, we all agree that we need to support our law enforcement officers and get criminals off the streets. And FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is investigating signal chat groups protesters in Minnesota have been using to coordinate the activities. He says they're looking for anything illegal that might be going on. Here's more on that.
The FBI is investigating groups allegedly organizing anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis. Director Kash Patel said the Bureau is examining whether protest activity in Minneapolis has violated federal law. Patel said the investigation was prompted by reports that rioters were organizing activities through groups on the encrypted messaging app Signal. Speaking on Fox News yesterday, Patel said he was made aware of an influencer's reporting who said he infiltrated a Signal group used by rioters and protesters.
The Signal Chat group is information we collect from the public because we repeatedly request the public provide us with information they have.
Patel suggested there was a possibility these chats were being coordinated by people around the country, not just in Minnesota. These groups have been allegedly sharing information about ICE agents' movements. Patel said the FBI is looking into whether anyone in them has been inciting violence.
We are not going after people and infringing on their freedom of speech to peacefully protest. We are definitely not going after people and their Second Amendment right to bear arms. Only if you incite violence and or threaten to do harm to law enforcement officials and break the law in any other way does it become an investigatory matter. So this Signal Chat is something that we, the FBI, are looking at and spearheading.
The investigation comes as federal authorities are investigating shootings by ICE officers in Minnesota. Speaking to Fox News, Patel urged the public not to be swayed by media narratives.
Do not let the media cement a false narrative. Let these investigations run its course. Let us do our job with our interagency and state and local partners, and let's all take a breath and calm down the situation.
The FBI also says federal authorities have arrested 4 people over the alleged theft of sensitive information from government vehicles earlier this month. The documents were allegedly stolen when protesters and agents clashed after an ICE officer shot a man in the leg. In a post on social media, one person claimed the documents contained the full names of FBI agents, phone numbers, and emails, as well as maps on where they are staying and where they are holding illegal immigrants. Patel warned earlier this week it is illegal for anyone to track and dox federal agents. In a post on X, he said the FBI is chasing down every last person responsible for attacking, impeding, or threatening federal law enforcement doing their jobs.
And a Friday deadline to fund the federal government is drawing near. Senate Republicans are asking Democrats to clarify their expectations around funding for the Department of Homeland Security to find a compromise. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that and updates on ICE operations in Minnesota.
The atmosphere on Capitol Hill yesterday was uncertain as Democrats unite against funding the DHS. They are calling for reforms, though they haven't put forward a unified proposal on what those would look like.
The bill is passed without objection.
Last week, the House passed the $1.2 trillion spending package at issue. It would fund the Departments of Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, and the DHS. The so-called minibus spending package seemed on track to pass the Senate until just a few days ago. That changed in the wake of the shooting of Alex Pretti, a protester carrying a firearm in Minneapolis, by Customs and Border Protection agents. Senate Democrats vowed to oppose the DHS component of the funding package in the incident's aftermath. Senate Leader John Thune called the death of Pretti a tragedy and called for an investigation into the shooting.
I'm glad that the president is sending Tom Homan to Minnesota, and I hope that his arrival will help restore order to the situation.
Thune called for reflection on some of the rhetoric leading up to the incident.
I also hope that recent tragedies have inspired some soul-searching among those who have participated in or encouraged abuse toward ICE officers and other law enforcement officers.
On that note, Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner called ICE officers a small bunch of wannabe Nazis yesterday during a press conference. Krasner vowed that they would be hunted down like Nazis were for decades and brought to justice. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is calling such comparisons shameful and said they lead to increased tensions. Senator Chuck Schumer labeled ICE actions as abuses and criticized the administration.
The Senate must not pass the DHS budget as currently written and must be reworked to rein in and overhaul ICE to ensure the public's safety.
President Trump yesterday called for an investigation into the shooting incident and has expressed a desire to reduce tensions in Minnesota.
Well, you know, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
The administration has withdrawn Greg Bavino, Commander-at-Large of the U.S. Border Patrol overseeing operations in the Twin Cities, in favor of Border Czar Tom Homan. But Democrats are demanding legislative changes before they'll back any bill containing DHS funding. While no unified message has emerged, several Democratic senators suggested potential changes. Senator Chris Murphy mentioned an independent investigation into Pretti's death, ending what he called roving patrols and calling for more education and body cams. For now, Majority Leader Thune says Republicans plan to move forward with the spending bill as a single package, adding that leadership is prepared to pursue a Plan B if that effort fails. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks to Daniel for that report. The National Transportation Safety Board held its public hearing yesterday, nearly a year after an Army helicopter collided with a passenger jet near Washington, D.C. The board's chairwoman said the agency has made significant progress in its investigation.
We asked the hard, uncomfortable questions that ruffled feathers, and we got to the truth. Our work, however, doesn't end today, as Member Inman stated, with the issuance of a final report. This is just the first step. We must, it is our duty to relentlessly, vigorously pursue safety change, which means we must do everything in our power, even ruffle feathers, to get our recommendations implemented, or this will happen again.
The NTSB has uncovered several factors that contributed to the crash. The agency pointed to the helicopter route past Ronald Reagan National Airport and warnings that the FAA had ignored for years. The board also determined that the Black Hawk had been flying 78 feet higher than it should have been. The NTSB added that the Army helicopter had turned off a key system that would have broadcast its location more clearly. In addition, the board's lead investigator said that an air traffic controller was handling 6 airplanes and 5 helicopters at the time. The Midair collision on January 29th in 2025, it killed all 67 people aboard both aircrafts. The incident marked the deadliest plane crash in the U.S., going all the way back to 2001. And much of the country is still in the grip of freezing cold after that massive winter storm. Nearly 400,000 customers are still without power. According to PowerOutage.us, one of the hardest hit areas is Nashville, Tennessee, where nearly 100,000 outages remain this morning. The storm dumped deep snow across more than 1,300 miles from Arkansas all the way up to New England. Temperatures are still frigid this morning, as far south as the Florida Panhandle. Officials say at least 50 people were killed as a result of the storm, including 3 Texas brothers, aged 6, 8, and 9. They fell through the ice on a pond. The Department of War says more than 5,000 National Guard members are on duty in 15 states, helping with the recovery efforts. And the cold is only expected to get worse. Forecasters predict some of the coldest temperatures in years along the East Coast. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is taking heat from President Trump and within his own country over a new trade deal with China. We're going to welcome an expert in studio to explain the backlash. And the U.S. officially leaves the Paris Climate Agreement. The White House says the move protects American energy independence. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. Last week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney went from Davos to Beijing, where he struck new economic cooperation deals with the regime. Joining us to discuss is Diana Furchtgott-Roth, Director at the Center for Energy, Climate and Environment at the Heritage Foundation. Diana, welcome. It seems like British Prime Minister, Mark Carney from Canada went there to the Chinese regime, and it seemed like dueling banjos with him and Trump. At Davos, they sort of contradicted each other. They sort of took underhanded jabs at each other. And then Carney goes to Xi in China, and people are now quite upset about potentially some of the blowback from these economic deals. What's going on?
Well, Prime Minister Carney agreed to export oil to China, which is a good thing. We want China to be dependent on Western oil. And he also agreed to take 49,000 EVs from China at a preferential rate of 6% instead of 100%. And that is not so safe, because if we don't like spy drones flying above our country, we definitely don't want spy EVs or electric vehicles with the capability of spying moving around our streets. Besides, this displaces Chinese automakers and it displaces Canadian automakers. And Canadian automakers are not pleased to have these Chinese vehicles undercutting their homemade cars. So that's the situation. Yes to the oil exports. It should be no to the vehicle imports.
And I think some might say that it's hard to have your cake and eat it too. So was there a middle path that Carney potentially could have navigated to be able to get the exports of the oil, I believe, through a pipeline that then leaves Vancouver and then goes over to China? But what leverage might Carney have had to have then been able to protect his auto industry?
China needs all the energy it can get. It's making the renewables that it's exporting all over the world. It's making these EVs. BYD, the main Chinese auto company, exported over 1 million vehicles. So China needs the energy. China needs Canadian oil. There was no reason for Prime Minister Carney to have to accept these Chinese exports of vehicles in return to the oil. He could have gone to President Xi and said, I'm going to sell you all the oil you want, without having to give in on the vehicles.
And Trump at Davos was connecting economic and national security together. You're bringing up both points as it relates to the risks of bringing these EVs into Canada, both potentially hollowing out their own capacity to economically and sustainably continue to build cars once they get these cheap cars. And then you mentioned that there's this spying capability. How are Canadians reacting to this?
I think Canadians are more concerned about their jobs going away than about the spying capability. Because the spying capability is more out in the future. Losing your job is right now. People want more money in their pockets. If their jobs go away, they don't have that money to be able to support their families. But in terms of all the discussions at Davos about net zero, about European countries slowing their economies by focusing on Chinese renewables, importing the EVs, importing the wind turbines, importing the solar panels, slowing their economy because this is more expensive. And in the meantime, coming to President Trump and saying, we want you to help us defend against Russia. We want help from you. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to President Trump.
Yeah, that was one of Trump's zingers right at Davos, where he mentioned they're happy to sell those solar or these wind turbines for energy generation, but they don't actually use them themselves. What's happening there as it relates to energy policy?
So I think China has put in place solar and wind, but as a share of total electricity generated and a share of total energy generated by these renewables, it's very small. They are getting most of their power out of their coal-fired power plants. They're building 2 a week. They have a lot of coal. They're using it. It doesn't make any sense for the West to say that we are reducing emissions, shipping our energy-intensive manufacturing off to China, where it's made in a dirtier way, and then patting ourselves on the back, saying we're moving towards net zero. It makes no sense. It strengthens China. It weakens Europe. And thank goodness that President Trump is moving away from renewables to using our own oil and natural gas right here under our feet in the United States.
And it seems like Trump and Ford from Canada were kind of singing from the same hymn book a little bit in their criticism of Carney. What do you expect from Ford and Carney's relationship as well as Trump, and how Trump may or may not respond if these electric vehicles start getting imported into Canada?
Well, I think it's important for President Trump to be importing more Canadian oil here in the United States. It's refined in our refineries. It creates jobs for American workers. And of course, Premier Ford is very concerned about jobs for his own constituents. He wants the auto jobs, the oil jobs, and it's a win-win with the North America energy platform. We have the heavy crude from Canada, the heavy crude from Mexico, and now Venezuela. We have the light crude that's produced here in the United States, and we refine all that in our refineries, making gasoline, diesel, heating oil that we can export all over the world.
Yeah, and it seems like Trump and Carney, as Trump continues to try to put pressure on Canada economically to join the United States, your wish of bringing in more Canadian oil, it seems like they're tangoing a little bit on that particular point. But I want to move back to the earlier point you made about the national security concerns with these Chinese EVs. Keir Starmer is now going to China as well, and we reported about how the spying and espionage in British society went all the way up to their leadership, and they're now building a new embassy right in the center of London where all of the communication lines run. What is the potential advantage for Chinese espionage with the export of these EVs? And is that something that we should worry about, not just with Canada, but also with London and with the UK?
Yes, it was reported that for 3 years the Chinese were listening in to parliamentary conversations in London at the very highest level. You know, these Europeans are in a bind. They put these net zero targets to reduce CO2. So they're basically requiring electric vehicles, but their companies cannot make them as cheaply as China because China is subsidizing them. China spends a great deal of its budget subsidizing its exports. It's selling a car called a Dolphin Surf in London for around $22,000. This is a compact four-door sedan. And so these Europeans need to do something about their net zero targets. Then they will not be as dependent on EVs. They won't have to import these Chinese EVs. And they can solve this themselves if they want to. And what they do about emissions is irrelevant to global temperatures. Because if they stopped using all fossil fuels right now, it would only make a difference of 1 degree Celsius by the year 2100. It makes no difference to global temperatures at all. Meanwhile, China is building 2 coal-fired power plants a week to make these EVs, to make the renewables. It makes zero sense for the Europeans to go down this path, Carrie.
You explain it so eloquently why China is lobbying for these net zero policies, because their cars are actually a Trojan horse that they can subsidize. Appreciate you breaking it down. Diana Furstcott-Roth, so great to see you. Thank you.
Great to be with you.
And a British newspaper reports that a Chinese spying operation has been hacking the mobile phones of senior London officials for years, as Diana actually just mentioned. The report comes as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer heads to China to meet with leader Xi Jinping on possible trade deals. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
A UK news outlet reports that the mobile phones of senior British officials were hacked by a Chinese spy operation between 2021 and 2024. The Telegraph said on Monday the hacking exposed the communications of the closest aides to former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak.
Well, it's not surprising at all, and it follows hot on the heels of a whole bunch of confirmed cyber attacks on the UK.
NTD could not independently verify these claims. It's unclear whether the breach included the mobile phones of the prime ministers themselves. However, the Chinese spying operation known as Salt Typhoon is suspected to be ongoing, which raises the possibility that the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, may also have been exposed. Starmer is flying to China on Tuesday, the first by a UK Prime Minister in 8 years, in an effort to secure trade and investment with Beijing. Critics have accused Starmer's Labour Party of jeopardizing national security by taking a soft line on hostile Chinese activity.
We now have this uncritical engagement with China, with Keir Starmer going to China, lowering the drawbridge and really offering quite a lot in return for what will be very little.
In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg on Monday, Starmer said the UK wouldn't have to choose between the US and China in response to questions about whether his meeting with Chinese leaders would anger President Trump. The UK security service MI5 alerted the British Parliament last November about the threat of Chinese spying. But according to a report by the Associated Press 2 years ago, U.S. officials had first alerted the UK in 2024 after finding out that hacking groups had gained access to telecom companies around the world. The Telegraph reports that in the past, China's foreign ministry dismissed the claims as baseless and lacking evidence. In addition to listening to and recording calls, the hackers reportedly had access to metadata and geolocation data, which provided them with information on who officials were communicating with and their locations. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Thanks to Arlene for that report. And the U.S. has officially withdrawn from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, completing President Trump's repeated promise to leave the global pact. The administration says the agreement undermines American energy independence, pressures the U.S. to fund other countries, and imposes unfair regulations. President Trump argues that taxpayer dollars should not go to nations that do not merit financial assistance. The president says the U.S. must prioritize affordable, reliable energy production, and that includes oil, gas, coal, and nuclear. And the White House says the withdrawal is a victory for American workers and economic growth, and it reflects a broader shift away from international climate mandates. Despite leaving, the administration notes that America has led global reductions in CO2 emissions over the past 2 decades. And still to come, the White House has announced 15 more drugs selected for Medicare price negotiations. What's on the list for potentially lower prices, which now includes 40 medications used by elderly Americans. And jury selection is underway in a trial involving Instagram and YouTube over youth addiction. The plaintiff says social media use as a child affected her mental health. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. The Trump administration has announced 15 new drugs selected for Medicare price negotiations. They include drugs that treat type 2 diabetes, HIV, and arthritis. The list includes medications on which Medicare spends the most money. Medicare Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz said yesterday, for too long, seniors and taxpayers have paid the price for skyrocketing prescription drug costs. He said his agency would take strong action to negotiate fair prices. So far, the federal government has already negotiated prices for 25 medications, including drugs like Ozempic, Rybelsus, and Wegovy. This is now the third round of a program enshrined in a 2022 law that allows Medicare to negotiate the price of the most popular and expensive drugs used by older people. And Yale University is expanding its financial aid program starting next fall. The school will be offering free tuition for families who make less than $200,000 a year. For families making under $100,000 a year, Yale is going to cover all the costs for the students. Officials say that with these changes, nearly half of U.S. households with kids under 17 could qualify for the total financial aid package. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, the sticker price to attend Yale per year, including tuition, room and board, and other fees, was nearly $92,000. The school says the change reinforces its commitment that cost will never be a barrier to a Yale College education. And a nationwide redistricting battle is underway as both sides aim to give their party the upper hand for the midterm elections. A judge has ruled against Democrats in Virginia. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
The U.S. House of Representatives is currently held by Republicans with a bare-bones majority. Democrats in Virginia are racing to finalize congressional lines in a bid to give Democrats the upper hand for the 2026 midterms. The effort met with pushback yesterday. Judge Jack Hurley Jr. ruled that state lawmakers broke rules when they started the process during a special session last year. The judge stated this blatant abuse of power by a majority ignores their own rules and resolutions, thereby trampling any and all procedural rights of the minority. Democrats plan to appeal the ruling, which is a major setback to their plans to gain up to 4 more seats in the U.S. House. The developments in Virginia come as Republicans are trying to protect a congressional seat in New York. A seat held by Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, the lone Republican representing the New York City area, is on the line. A judge this week ruled that the seat covering Staten Island and Brooklyn dilutes the power of its Black and Hispanic voters. Republicans are appealing. Several other states are pushing to redraw lines as both parties try to give themselves the upper hand in the midterms before voters even make it to the ballot box. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Thanks to Melina for that report. 2 major tech companies are heading to court in L.A. this week over claims their platforms may have affected children's mental health. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more from the courthouse with more details on the lawsuit.
Jury selection began here at the Los Angeles Superior Courthouse in the first major case accusing Meta's Instagram and Google's YouTube of using addictive design features that could harm children and teens' mental health. Initially, 4 social media companies were named in the lawsuit, but just hours ago, we learned TikTok settled late Monday night and Snapchat reached a settlement with the plaintiff last week. At the center of the case is a 20-year-old woman identified only as Kaylee G.M. She alleges she became addicted to social media as a child and later struggled with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Her lawsuit claims the companies designed their platforms to maximize addictiveness among children to drive profits, drawing comparisons to tactics used by the tobacco and gambling industries. Instagram has denied those claims, arguing they are not legally responsible for third-party content posted on their platforms. use. According to Superior Court Judge Caroline Cole, both companies argue Kaylee's mental health challenges stem from other experiences during her childhood, not social media use. The companies also point to safety measures they say are already in place, including parental controls and content management tools. Ahead of the trial, a YouTube executive said the company plans to argue its platform is fundamentally different from other social media companies listed in the lawsuit and should not be treated the same in court. About 150 potential jurors are being questioned each day through at least Thursday. While jurors are not required to stop using social media, they are prohibited from researching the case, changing account settings on their social media profiles, creating new accounts, or looking up anyone involved in the case. So far, 6 attorneys are representing the plaintiff, while Meta and Google each have 2 attorneys present. The terms of the TikTok and Snapchat settlements were not disclosed. The trial is expected to last until March 20th, and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to testify. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Thanks to Christina for that report. Looks much warmer in LA than it does here in New York. Up ahead, the Treasury Department is hosting a star-studded event to launch the Trump Accounts initiative. This as the White House doubles down on its affordability messaging ahead of the midterm elections. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. The Treasury Department today is hosting a star-studded event to launch the Trump Accounts initiative. It comes as President Trump doubles down on his affordability messaging ahead of the midterm elections. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu, standing by at the summit. Mari, great to see you. Good morning. What's expected from the launch today?
Carrie, great to see you too. Good morning to you. That's right. And just in time for tax season, President Trump and other private sector investors here are spending this all-day summit to officially launch that Trump Accounts initiative. And lots of big names are expected in attendance today, including, of course, the Commander-in-Chief himself, who's set to make a keynote address at 11 a.m. Then, of course, there's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. There's rapper Nicki Minaj, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, Cheryl Hines, Kevin O'Leary, Michael Dell, and many other CEOs that have already pledged to match that government's initial contribution to these accounts. So how do they work exactly? The federal government deposits $1,000 for any eligible babies, that is babies born between January 1, 2025 and 2028 into these accounts. That's tax-free growth until it's withdrawn at age 18. And there's no income limit for eligibility. All you have to have is a social security number. Parents can then contribute up to $5,000 annually and then withdraw for educational expenses. And then when the child turns 18, the account then functions like a traditional IRA. And here's a Heritage Foundation economist, E.J. Antony, talking about it this morning. Take a look.
These accounts are essentially seed money from the federal government, but you then have the opportunity throughout your child's life to continue to make investments in their future. And that can be used for a lot of different things, whether it's college education or community college or trade school, even buying a home, starting a new business, you name it. And so it really does give these young Americans a kickstart, if you will, on life, and it really helps build their financial future in a big way that we just haven't had in the United States before. And I think it's especially important that we're doing this now at a time when the administration inherited such a terrible cost of living crisis from the previous admin.
Now, this launch is coming just a day after President Trump took his affordability messaging to Des Moines, Iowa, ahead of the midterm elections. And his chief of staff, Susie Walz, says that President Trump is going to ramp up his domestic travel to one U.S. city per week, acting like it's 2024 and he's on the campaign trail despite not being on the ballot. He's going to act like it is. And the accounts themselves now are set to go live on July 4, 2026. That's on America's 250th anniversary. Carrie, back to you.
Mari, sounds like a great program, and it's great to see you reporting indoors. Thanks for the update. NTD Washington correspondent Mari Otsu. And one of NTD's exclusive arts and cultural events is happening right now. The NTD International Photography Competition is exhibiting its finalist work this week at New York City's Salmagundi Club. The competition celebrates traditional values and the aesthetics of photography with works that showcase luminosity, kindness, and naturalism. Photographers around the world submitted their works, and NTD's Flora Hua was there for the opening day. Here's more on that.
When was the last time you saw a picture so beautiful that you wanted to save it as your wallpaper? Truly beautiful and powerful visual art can touch our heart and connect us. I certainly had many moments like that while walking through the finalist exhibition of NTD's photography competition. Let's take a look. NTD's photography competition has two categories, social relations and humanity, as well as nature and landscape.
I think good photography, right now we have a lot of division in the world where we are failing to see the common humanity in each other. And if we can just remember that we're all created, by a creator who loves all of us the same, if we can see that in each other, it will begin to bring us back together instead of growing further apart.
Gina Pottinger is a professional photographer with a 25-year career, and this is the first time she ever took part in a competition.
I think this is an incredible event. I thank the Epoch Times and NTD for putting it on. Seriously, this is a gold mine for the city of New York.
James Azair from Kansas City, Missouri loved this exhibition. He shared with us the story behind his photograph, a village in France called Rocamadour.
So you know that when you go there, it's a true secluded town, and it has a very special religious connotation to the people that live there. People still go there just to pray.
Adrian Yu from Hong Kong wanted to share the values that he has been practicing for nearly 3 decades: truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. They're the core tenets of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline rooted in the Buddhist tradition.
What I want to express is that this world needs truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. We see that today's world is full of turbulence and insecurity, and in some places, there is even chaos. If truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance were promoted in the world, not limited to a single group or a single country, but practiced by all humanity, with everyone striving to be a good person, then perhaps the disorder in the world would gradually subside, and people could coexist more peacefully and joyfully in this world.
And I really appreciated, again, the realism, the fact that the competition was focused on luminosity, generosity, kindness, because that's in my work. I consider my photography as documentary photography, just documenting what people are doing and how they're living and how they're trying to make their local environment a better place, how they are loving one another and caring for one another. So I felt that the photos I have taken would fit very well with the theme.
Lucy Zhou, the director of the competition, says these photos reflect the theme very well.
This time we received application from over 180 countries, which is really surprised us. And then the judge panel picked up the 186 photos into the finalists.
The exhibition is taking place throughout the week, with the award ceremony scheduled this Thursday. Flora Hua, NTD News.
And thanks to Flora for that report. If you're in New York City this week, get to the Salmagundi Club. You will not regret it. Next, this month is called Dry January, based on a tradition of abstaining from alcohol for the whole month after the holidays. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with a member of Alcoholics Anonymous about the damage alcohol caused in his life and how he found his way out. Have a look.
Yeah, my name is Eddie B. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Eddie B. was surrounded by alcohol growing up.
All my family drank, and as a child, that's what I aspired to. I aspired to being able to hang out with my brothers and my family in the bar.
He liked the effects in the beginning.
It just gave me that extra push to be somebody who I was not. It gave me a lot more confidence to boast and to be able to brag about myself, where I never had that before. I was always a quiet young man.
But what seemed like fun soon became a habit.
I was starting to get into fights in bars. I was starting to become the tough guy. I was starting to hang out with people that I shouldn't have been with, I started to get arrested.
Eddie joined the Navy to try to escape the mounting problems, but the drinking continued there for another 10 years. One day an epiphany came as the suffering mounted.
To this day, I still don't know what it was. But all I know is I dropped to my knees in the middle of the street, in a Brooklyn street with traffic whizzing by me. And I was just done. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
The Navy put him into a detox, and he soon started attending AA meetings.
When you're able to listen and to share the same problems with another human being, it works somehow.
His friends from the bar disappeared.
So I had to find new friends and a new lifestyle within the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, it's not all fun and games all the time. It's about living life. And this thing called life is not for weaklings, you know. You got to be pretty strong.
Step 4 of the AA program encourages one to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself.
I had to be open and honest and really tell all my deep, dark secrets to another human being. And that was my sponsor. And I told him everything. And then we wrote down, who did I harm? You know, I mean, besides, you know, I would steal off my mother as a child, and I would steal from the jobs. But who else did I hurt? And how did I hurt them?
Eddie's 2 brothers were also alcoholics. He managed to help one get sober, who stayed dry for 17 years before passing away. The other one wasn't as lucky.
I found him underneath a bridge, and I had him in my arms, and he looked at me in my eyes, and he said, I'm tired. I'm tired. I knew what he meant. I threw everything at him. I got him into rehabs, detoxes. I got him to meetings, and he just couldn't hold on. And he died in my arms that night.
Eddie has reaped the benefits of clean living. He has been sober for 40 years, had a career in financial planning, and raised his children, who have all graduated from college.
I have a good life today. I just bought a property, and I'm building a new house. I've gone from foreclosing on a house to building a new house. And that's materialistic. That's one of the rewards. I call it a reward. That's a reward for me doing the right next thing.
Eddie's message to alcoholics who are still suffering is that sobriety works and it's a better life than the one you're leading now. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks to Daniel for that very inspiring story. And if you are struggling with addiction, do reach out. You need the help. And if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We would love to hear from you. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or use our NTD app. Thanks for watching. I'm Carrie Dunst. I'll see you soon.